Hey everyone, welcome back to OnBase. I'm your host, Chris Moody, and today I'm very excited to have Trent Talbert with me today, and we're going to talk about the marketing playbook for 2025. Trent, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. I know we had to reschedule. I had a snowstorm, and then today we actually had a tornado warning come through, which didn't cancel our time. So this is really good. But I like to start every show asking about your journey. So what led you to what you're doing today?
Honestly, I've been in B2B tech my entire career. It was a little fortuitous that I just happened to land at an agency that was a B2B tech agency. That was back in '08, which was a different world, and I was happy to have any job, let alone one that would actually really revolve into a career that I think is not to be too braggadocious about it, but great. But at the same time, I think it's been a great market to learn. It's evolved tremendously in my tenure as well. So was a happy journey. But I've always been on the agency side, always working with B2B tech, both emerging brands and very well established brands.
Awesome. Well, this may actually lead to a second podcast episode we do together, but I know that you're behind an annual marketing survey that's pretty incredible. I'm curious, what's one insight that has stood out to you so far that you think all marketers should pay attention to?
Yeah, so the AMP study just came out last week. We just released it. Really excited about it. I think honestly the probably most interesting take that I saw out of this is just the optimism around goals in particular. So despite what you might see for budgets or tactics or challenges and changes, we did see a lot of folks that are actually optimistic about hitting their goals this year. So I think we can debate whether or not that's because we've gotten better at setting goals or whether or not, we've cracked the nut on, how to reach them. Personally, I believe it's kind of more in the former, but 80% of marketers within the B2B tech space are feeling optimistic about hitting their goals this year.
I love that. Yeah, optimism is always a good thing, and especially when we can deliver on it, right? I am an eternal optimist, but it is good when we can match that to the well-orchestrated goal. I'm curious too, how are some of the faster growing companies that you're surveying, how do you think they're redefining demand gen and customer relationships to be more successful than their peers?
Yeah. So the interesting thing that we saw, at least whenever we started looking at companies that were, either having moderate or more significant growth for this calendar year, saw something that was more, honestly, more growth equals more challenges. And that didn't necessarily correlate back to budgets. It did correlate just to the number of different issues that they were citing across the board. So, they're more likely to be focused on brand, or they're more likely to be focused on ABM. I think that there is a benefit, and not that I would recommend anybody do a scattershot approach, but there is a benefit of just frankly having more theaters, being out there, doing more things, trying more things, testing and comparing them, and then using what is working for you. That's going to inevitably get you back to a growth faster.
Yep. I love that. I don't think we could call this a podcast if we didn't cover ABM and AI, right? So let's start with ABM. What do you think is stopping organizations from fully leveraging account-based marketing and personalization, and how can they improve?
I think there's two or three things that come top of mind to me, at least, on what's stopping organizations. I do think a lot of it is honestly their setup in terms of either the breakdown between what is the campaigns org versus the field org, and kind of who's got the seller relationship. I think more often than not that gets in the way more than it's actually helpful. I think as much as we like to play together and have kumbaya moments, more often than not, one silo wants to maintain their budget. They're more focused on that. They're more focused on the goals that are going to get them to achieve that. And that is, the antithesis of looking at an ABM approach, right? How can you collectively, as a group, generate team-sourced revenue, or how can you, figure out across your entire total addressable market how do we target these accounts, and what's the interesting take on that, and who's then the right teams to kind of follow up on that. It just requires a different motion, setup, organizational construction to get to that point. Personalization is just the further step of that then, because unless you've got a clear line of sight on like your go to market, your TAM, here's how we're going to break up our ICP, here's how we're then going to programatize that, getting to personalization feels like even a harder step, right? Because what do you personalize them with? More often than not, we're still talking to folks that are, don't have their rules set up in terms of how do we protect from individual contacts from seeing content from different folks within the organization in the email channel. I think that we just haven't got there. Honestly, where we see more often success is really on those kind of emerging brands that just don't have any legacy, don't have silos, don't have team members that they really have to worry about stepping on toes. They're the ones that are able to kind of really accelerate and get to solid ABM strategies and personalization quickly.
Yeah, I was trying to fight a smile when you said that. Just the thought of the newness and not having any legacy things to solve. I think everyone listening is probably going, wouldn't that be this nice utopia that we would live in? You've got a lot of agency experience. You talked about that in your journey. You're sitting on a mountain of insights from your survey. When a lot of folks are doing the same tactics and a lot of companies are doing digital ads, we're all on LinkedIn, we're all trying to do some of the same things. What are some ways that you think brands can really stand out and capture attention?
Yeah, I think the agency edgy side of me wants to say you got to be bold. I mean, just because everybody's using display doesn't mean you have to use display, or doesn't mean you have to use it in the same way. I saw some great kind of combination of LinkedIn and IPA data that was looking at really when do you prioritize emotional messaging versus rational messaging, and what's the right kind of blend of those two things. I think honestly in B2B tech, and a lot of folks will say this, we're just so conservative about the messages that we put out there. We really focus on those rational approaches because that's the way we think people make decisions within organizations. But yet, when was the last time your organization made a decision purely on a rational basis? It's not, right? And so having the ability to stand out at the emotional level and doing that through either entertainment or education, that's what's going to help you stand out. And I think the easy way to say that is it's having a creative angle that aligns back to whatever the insight is that you're building from an account perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you and I have both seen in data and anecdotally through lots of calls and working with customers and different accounts, we're seeing a push deeper in the funnel to worry more about closed won and more about retention and expansion. What are some of the insights and data telling you about why CMOs are starting to move deeper in the funnel and think more about customer loyalty and lifetime value versus some of the traditional demand gen metrics?
But, handful of things. I think the 80-20 rule generally does apply in this world, right? 80% of most organizations' revenue is coming from 20% of the clients. And, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to keep a client or a customer around than it is to go and acquire a net new client or customer in this case. So, just the sheer economics of it makes a ton of sense, right? Focusing on loyalty, focusing on kind of what is your CLV and how do we, really personalize those downstream engagements, including things like onboarding, including things like the renewal process. More often than not, organizations haven't taken the good approach to ABM down to those kind of final mile and or the renewal cycles in the same way that we've seen it in the top of funnel world. So I think that there's a lot of improvement that can actually happen. But down in that. Beyond that, it purely from a loyalty or customer lifetime value, just having a better sense of what is the ROI of those approaches becomes much easier than a lot of times in terms of the revenue source model. And so, we see, and we saw this within the data itself, when people are rolling up for CMOs in terms of their dashboards, customer loyalty, CLV were the two highest likely to be on that CMO dashboard. I think in this case, the third piece of it really was then demand source revenue, or in this case, how are our campaigns tying back to source pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know budgets, that's always a hot topic with any survey. What are some of the trends you're seeing in budgets for the faster growing companies, and what should leaders focus on?
Yeah, and maybe another optimistic take here is, when we did kind of look at it across the board, not just within the growth-oriented organizations, we are seeing 2/3 of budgets are on the kind of flat or increasing. That's the headline news there. I think maybe the more interesting nugget though is where we saw the change year over year, and this is even a bigger change whenever you think about those growth-oriented companies. Where all the change came from year over year was from folks that were in the flat budget. So what we saw was there's a flat budget that got squeezed and basically pushed to the edges. So either they're increasing, which is great for everybody, or they're decreasing. And so I think you've got organizations that are either choosing a cost reduction strategy or a growth strategy fueled by more budgets. Those are, in this case, both strategies and approaches. And I think what I would encourage everybody to do is align to that, stick to one of those strategies and approaches. If people would just stop saying, do more with less, because that is not a strategy. It is very much wishful thinking. You can do less with less, and you can do, frankly, better things with less. That's fine. Or you can do more with more. That's great too. Or you can even do more quality things with more money. I think all of those are the right approaches there, but just trying to get more out of your teams is just going to lead to burnout. So I think if I had to synthesize that down to a simple approach, which is just pick your strategy, know what it is, make sure you don't overextend yourself into too many different channels, really focus on doing the channels that you're going to adopt well with the budget that you have available, and just be real about what that budget is.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I was going to press you a little bit. You answered it already, though. I was going to say, for the marketers on the call that feel like they are stuck in the middle and they are being asked to do more with less, what are some of the tips? I think you just hit on them, but if there's anything else you want to say, kind of that arm on the shoulder to the marketer who feels stuck in the middle, that isn't doing less with less and isn't doing more with more, that they are kind of stuck. Anything else you'd say to them?
Yeah. One, highlight the stuff that you're not doing as a result of the budget that you have. I think that's just as important. And it's an old adage in strategy in general. What strategy is choosing what not to do, not what to do. And being real about that and saying, look, here's the 4 things that we want to do this year. We have budget for 3 of those things. Here's how we're going to prioritize it. If we get incremental funding, we're going to go into 4. But be, like I said, very real about what that is and what the expectations are. And I still think you're going to be better off maximizing in that analogy, the 3 channels that you decide to deploy against, or the 3 plays, or the 3 campaigns that you decide to deploy against, than, really stretching into the 4th, because doing something half-assed is not going to be successful for you. And that's not going to put you back in the light to get more budget in the future.
Yeah, we need to do a podcast t-shirt series, because there was a mic drop moment there. Strategy is choosing what not to do. I was thinking, big blocky text. That'd be a great t-shirt to give to marketers. I'm curious too. I think we all geek out on tactics and channels, and anytime there's a survey, we're trying to look for the biggest delta. Were there any significant changes that you saw in tactics and channels?
I wish there was. Unfortunately, the year over year, this has been consistent for the last 3 years we've run this study, that the top 6 tactics haven't changed in terms of order of priority. It's what you would expect, right? It's being out there in paid social, it's being out there in programmatic paid advertising. It's I think the Where we did see some kind of interesting nuggets was there was some, slight jockeying where email marketing came back up in tactics, industry events came back up in tactics in terms of its approach. I think, like I said, I wish there was a new silver bullet, because I used to love that whenever we had the new social platform or the new digital channel that you could just all of a sudden deploy. For me, it's really all about doing the fundamentals well. It's making sure that you've got all of those channels working and orchestrated together to create the coherent experience that you want for your prospects and your customers. That's what's going to move the needle these days, which it's just harder for marketers, which I think we can all have some empathy on. It's getting more complicated by the day, but that is the life we've now chosen for ourselves.
It chose us, Trent. That's really good. I'm going to twist your arm on this one.
Okay.
You can pick one. So what is the single biggest challenge in B2B marketing right now?
Stated by our audience, it is generating high quality traffic and leads. That came back up from the number 3 spot last year, believe it or not. But I think more consistently, that's there.
Yep. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I was wondering what we're 1 and 2, and that's 3, right? But yeah, hopefully we can get some brand building in there too. But we have to deliver on the metrics. So we're gonna move into the lightning round now, Trent. We're coming up on our time. I know we both have plenty of things we have to tackle today, more data to sift through. What are some of the standout tools or technology that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. So honestly, any tool within the intent space and any tool that can kind of connect you back into buying group intent, I think is going to be a game changer for your organization, right? Both from the kind of taking that and applying to the marketing motions, and then also injecting that back into the sales motions. Anything in that space is cool. And, there's obviously some, demand base can do that. So can some competitors of demand base. And there are some kind of, pretty neat stuff that you can do from a marketing perspective out there. I also like, what, some of the personalization companies that are doing. I think, once again, demand base has that capability, but so does Mutiny. There's some cool tech that is out there that can really, I think, help you improve the overall experience that you're trying to deliver. And whether you do that in an ABM fashion or even a more traditional fashion, either one of those can be game changers.
What about your favorite reads? So books, blogs, newsletters, podcasts. What's on the top of your list?
Yeah. A lot of news these days. Got to kind of stay on top of, but I'm a big fan of the Two Bobs podcast personally, in this case. But Blair Ines within that actually just came out with a new book that's called The Four Conversations. I think his root and origination comes out of kind of creative agencies, which is very much my world. But his latest book and his, even some of his latest podcasts are starting to bleed into more, how do you actually sell expertise? And I think that is honestly what a lot of B2B motions actually are, is we're selling ourselves as experts in whatever that actual topic is. And so his new book was actually really great. Like I said, it's called The Four Conversations, but it goes through and talks about how, how we think about the sales motion, or should be thinking about the sales motion differently. And there are these kind of key conversations that you need to have. Some of those are happening with you in the room. Some of those are happening without you in the room, but you need to kind of protect it going back. And I would say, to go back to your question 2-3 questions ago, brand building is that piece, right? The first conversation that he talks about is the probative conversation. In this case, having a brand that stands for something that's educational or has a feeling tied to it that is relevant to your audience, like that is going to just make you so much more effective in your demand gen tactics. It's going to make you so much more effective in your sales tactics. And he's all over that. So like I said, I could geek out on that for a little bit. I won't here, but certainly more to talk about there.
Outstanding. We will put that on our list. What about people? Who inspires you in the B2B space?
I do think April Dunford has a great book and came out with, in this case, trying to position technology companies in particular better. I think that has certainly been one that has been, pressed about, heard around it from a client perspective. That's obviously awesome. I think in this case, seeing that manifested in some folks like, Bob Wright, who's a kind of consultant and applies, I think, a lot of kind of great positioning for companies. And he's, I think the brainchild behind a lot of positioning for tech organizations. And so, his group is pretty great. And then there's a bunch of other folks too, Anna Powell from a RevOps perspective, I think is great. So certainly more we could probably talk about there. But I do think that there's space too for, new thinkers within B2B as well. And, people trying to apply more influencer channels and creativity. I think that there's opening for folks as well for the next set of influencers.
Awesome. All right. And then the most important question of all, Trent, two things. Number one, how can everyone get in touch with you after this show? And number two, how can everyone download the full survey?
Yes. So two ways. Obviously, happy to connect on LinkedIn. It's by all means the only probably social channel that I actually am still connected into. Also, you can go check out april6.com, and you can find your way to our contact information there. LinkedIn's probably the faster of the two there. As far as the April 6 Marketing Pulse for 2025, in this case, you can just search April 6 Marketing Pulse, or AMP25 will get you there. But we can probably put a link in the show notes as well to the survey, the findings, and then we do kind of perspectives from a bunch of different folks from the creative and strategy side within our team as well.
Love it. Perfect. Crushed it. Thanks so much for joining us today, Trent.
Of course. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. And, certainly hope the weather gods keep shining on you.
Hey, we made it. We're good now.